Welcome to We Are Only Human, the official podcast for the College of Education and Human Sciences here at Oklahoma State University. I'm your host, Alyssa Pena, and today we have a new guest, Darius Prier, the Associate Dean of Equity and Inclusion. We are super excited to have you here today.
It's great to be here.
I'm excited to hear everything you have to say. Very excited. I guess first off, we can start by just having you tell us a little bit about you. Who's Darius?
Absolutely. So, obviously, my name is Darius Prier. So, I would classify myself as an author, educator, educational leader, community activist of sorts, and just one who strongly believes and has a passion for equity and inclusion work. You know, I truly believe this is the work that will make a difference in creating a better world, a better society, a better culture. And so really that has been my lived passion and my lived purpose every single day of my life since I can remember. And so that's a part of who I am.
And what made you want to go into this area?
So for me, it really started years ago when I was assistant director of admission and coordinator of multicultural affairs at Miami University. And through that particular position, I had designed a pre-college program. And that is, of course, a program that helps introduce kids, particularly underserved, under-resourced, and underrepresented students with what does it mean for preparing oneself for college, right? Mm-hmm. When you have not seen many of these opportunities we take for granted. I grew up in a household full of educators. And so in terms of access and opportunity and what is financial aid? How do I think about filling out scholarships? How do I think about my identity and what that means in terms of preparing myself to go to college? That was a lot for them. That was new information for them. And so in the midst of that program, I learned so much about their lives. So you had some students who were waking themselves up every single day, did not know where they were going to lay their head at from one night to the next because they had been homeless. You had other students who were really serving almost as parents of their families because their fathers, were struggling with incarcerated or mothers were struggling with substance abuse. Some of them had been involved in unfortunate realities of violence. And so when you have witnessed and seen and advocated for young people who have been through those kind of daunting, what they might call adverse childhood experiences, it really inspired me in terms of the difference that I could make of being a leader, in academia. And so from there, that's inspired the work that I do today that has taken many different shapes and forms. But that was really, I would say, the beginning foundation of my inspiration for the work that I do today.
That's amazing. And going through your lifetime of doing this, is there something that you're very proud of that you've, accomplished or started?
Yeah, so I would argue that is one of my major, I would argue one of my accomplishments that I'm proud of because at the end of that, so that was a 4-year program. So they would start with us from 9th grade on up to 12th grade, right? And so every summer, if they attended the program for several weeks and they finished with 3.0 GPA, then they had a free scholarship to Miami University.
Oh, wow.
And so that's a huge part of my legacy that really helped indicate to me about the kind of leadership decisions that I was making that could impact their lives. And so it wasn't just about showing them this is the information that you can have in order to go to college, but actually providing that access that we always talk about, right? And so at the end of that program, if they were doing what they were supposed to do, then I felt like I was accountable to them in creating a space where they could take advantage of that opportunity. So I'm very proud of that. Very proud of when I was at Duquesne University, which was recently obviously my prior institution, but I was able to develop an equity education certificate. So many of our pre-service teachers are going out into schools that are increasingly diverse, right? And so how do we prepare individuals to go into worlds that might be different from what they have experienced, from what they have known from their own particular background? And so the Equity Education Certificate was one in which they could engage in issues of social justice, engage in issues of ethics and leadership, and how they interface and better understand the voices and sociocultural context of the identities of the students they were getting ready to go out there and teach? And then how would that inform the type of curriculum and the type of pedagogy that they might be able to adopt as they enter these worlds, so that when they enter that first year of teaching, it wouldn't be such a culture shock as we have heard about that can happen.
Yes.
So I'm also very proud of that. And then there's a project called Project Hope that I'm the co-founder of, and so issues of homelessness is very prevalent in Pittsburgh. And so, one of the things that I tell our pre-service teachers or current educators or educational leaders is that if a student is hungry and homeless, it's going to be hard for them to hear anything you have to say in the classroom. And so I really wanted to create spaces and places and opportunities for us to engage our classes in homeless shelters. And we really sensitized and demystify certain kinds of stereotypes that we have about how one becomes homeless, right? It's not just this person on the side of the street with a cup that we might presume is lazy. No, people have lost their jobs. You have the pandemic, for example, that has really impacted people and their economic opportunities. And so we really, I hosted classes inside those shelters, and it was life-changing for many of the educators and the students alike. And so those are some of the pieces that I'm really, really proud of and always in the front of my mind.
No, you should definitely be proud of those things. Those are amazing things that you've just accomplished and did. From being at your last institution, how did you end up at this new institution in Oklahoma?
So, as you can tell, I'm very passionate about equity and inclusion, and I see this position come across that said Associate Dean for Equity and Inclusion in the College of Education and Human Sciences. And they were searching for a person who, one, obviously has the intellectual and scholarly expertise about what equity and inclusion means, right? But two, to use that knowledge and skills to help our graduate students and our faculty think about equity-oriented frameworks to their scholarship and their research. What are the kinds of real-world questions that they might begin to ask for the kinds of data that they're trying to collect to improve the type of underrepresented and under-resourced societies in which we are trying to transform or change or improve in some sense of ways. And so there's a certain kind of epistemological way in which you ask those questions. The position was also seeking someone who wanted to connect with the local communities, right? How do we develop partnerships with underserved communities? And what are those local community organizations that in some way are dedicated to this kind of work around equity? And then how might we connect our classes to those particular community organizations? And so as a land-grant institution, as you know, this idea of connecting teaching and learning and scholarship and research and extension, we are a service-oriented institution that deeply believes in that kind of work. And so community engagement is a foundation and fundamental to everything I do. And then recruitment of underserved and underrepresented populations was also something that they were asking. And so the position itself, I say that to say it really met every single thing that I've ever wanted to do in a position. And so I'm really living my dream right now. I'm living my dream. So
I'm happy for you.
Yeah.
And I think we do need that here at this institution. So I think you'll be a great addition. What is something you're really excited for to start here at Oklahoma State?
I'm excited to build relationships. I'm excited to introduce myself to the Stillwater community, to the Tulsa community, to the Oklahoma City community, and really listening and learning from them. I think is really important when you're in an inaugural position. So we are starting literally from the ground up. It's really important this first year that I do a lot of listening and a lot of learning and a lot of engaging to really get the temperature of who we are and who we think we are as it relates to equity and inclusion. And so part of that means building up a strategic plan. I've been visiting with the different academic units across the college to kind of hear them, as well as to kind of articulate some of the fundamental pieces that I would like for us to begin to think about in terms of governance and finance. How do we make decisions about equity and inclusion in our policies, our practices, our programs, and our initiatives? How do we think about teaching and learning in culturally responsive and equitable ways? What does it mean to do this in terms of scholarship and research? Obviously, recruitment and persistence and community engagement. These are the core pieces that I've talked with our academic units. So this office, which is what I'm excited about, is not a sidebar conversation. This is how are we thinking about equity and inclusion literally across all of our academic units. And so we've been building that buy-in for our internal stakeholders, and I'm excited about getting outside the office and meeting the Stillwater community and the surrounding communities.
Awesome. How are you settling into Oklahoma right now? How is it a little different from what you're used to?
It's very different because I'm coming from Pittsburgh, right?
Yes.
And so some may disagree with me depending on where they're coming from, but Pittsburgh, for me, and where I'm originally from, which is Middletown, Ohio, a very small town, Pittsburgh was very fast. But it was also very lively with arts and culture and education, and so I loved it for the time I was there in the season. I was there, and so when I came to Stillwater, people were wondering, okay, well, how's he going to adjust, or to this different pace? So this is, I would say, it's a much slower pace. It's calm, it's quiet, it's peaceful, it's convenient, everything's accessible. I can get on the plane that's about 10 minutes from my house. And so we love it. We absolutely love it. So I loved Pittsburgh, but I now love Stillwater. And the fact that you have Tulsa and the rich history and the community there that's, for me, an hour, down the way that's across town in Pittsburgh. So what seems to be far for a lot of folks, for me, everything seems to be really convenient. And so I'm excited. So from that standpoint, in terms of just as a community, I love it.
Well, that's good. I know some people they're like, oh. Like when I came down, I'm from Houston, so when I came down over here, I was like, oh, it's a little different.
Absolutely.
So
that's a big city as well.
Adjustment, yes.
Yep, absolutely.
I know next week is Nancy Randolph Day.
Yes.
Could you tell us a little bit of like what you have in store for that?
Yes. So the theme this year is celebrating courage, commitment, and community across difference. So when you think about Nancy Randolph Davis, 1949, this is the first African American to enroll at Oklahoma State University, and there were local activists who pushed for that to happen. So that wasn't just natural, right? Because we're talking at a point where segregation was, still part of the legal norm. And once she entered the institution, she was taking some classes, and during the second week of one of the classes, she had a test. And it's important to know the backdrop of this is that Nancy could not sit inside the actual classroom. Nancy would, because it's separate but equal, she's outside in the hallway, or she's in the back of an office nook, and she's literally peeping behind the door to try to listen in to even hear the content of what's being taught. So the fact that she scored the second highest test score on the first test in one of her classes, her peers who loved Nancy so much and just really respected her brilliance, they went to the faculty and said, she needs to be inside the classroom with us. And so that was a sense of valuing her worth and her dignity and her humanity. And it's quite a moment that became the catalyst for essentially integrating, faculty, staff, and students from underrepresented populations, and particularly communities of color. And so there's a huge amount of debt that we owe to Nancy Randolph Davis. I'm not sitting here without the legacy and the fight of Nancy Randolph Davis. And so that's why that theme is celebrating courage, commitment, and community across difference, to, on the one hand, honor her courage, her resilience, her bravery, her endurance to persist in the face of the obstacles that she was facing, but also to say, today in the 21st century, what does it mean? What does this courage mean in this particular moment, in this particular hour, across any number of different underrepresented populations? So African American, Latino, Latina, the LGBTQIA plus community, our first generation students, and everything in between, right? What does this idea of equity and inclusion mean across the different dimensions of difference that now exist? And what does it mean to to really think about the different thought perspectives, different viewpoints, different identities in these different backgrounds, and how do we cross-pollinate those conversations to move more closely toward a more democratic society that we say that we want to achieve. It's not always easy, right? These are not easy conversations, but part of our job in higher ed is this opportunity for intellectual growth and intellectual development. When we look at major points in our lives where we have grown, there's been a bit of a struggle, right, to get to that next goal. And so for me, this is what I want this particular event to do. And so we have our keynote speaker, Dr. Michelle Bryan, who is out of University of South Carolina, Vice President of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. And then we have a host of faculty, staff, and students that will be a panel after that discussion, after her keynote, that will be in response to her discussion, and then we'll engage in some Q&A. So I'm really excited about the format and how we've structured the program, and looking forward to it because we have a great attendance.
Yes, and I'm sure it'll be great. And it's just, I didn't know that about the whole classroom thing. I only knew, so much. So it was great to hear that. I mean, it only takes one to give everyone an opportunity. Like myself, you get opportunities, but you got to work harder than some.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
It was nice to hear that.
Thank you.
Before we end the podcast, do you have anything else to say? Anything to mention about the new position? Anything?
I would say that it's really important for this position to be about reconciliation rather than rejection. For this position to be about unification rather than division. It's important for me for this position to be about hope and possibility rather than complacency. And so on that last point, when you think about the work of equity, it is attempting to redress historical imbalance of the not yet to get to what might be possible, right? So, and that's a different lens to say we are still trying to achieve and further equity in any number of ways. So there are certain things that we have not yet seen yet. In the church, we would call that faith, right?
Yes.
Faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen, Hebrews 11:1. And so even from that standpoint, we are trying to work towards something we have not seen yet. We are continuing to try to do that. And so it's to not let the present realities, whatever they may be, and the tensions and struggles, to let us fall prey to a certain kind of hopelessness or fatalism that nothing can be done, right?
Yes.
And so despite some of the challenges, I remain hopeful, right, in the midst of an ongoing continued journey toward equity and inclusion.
Amazing. I'm so glad I got to talk to you and just hear what you had to say. It was amazing. And obviously you're going to be doing great things. So I hope to see all those accomplishments that you'll be having here at Oklahoma State University.
It's been an honor and pleasure, Alyssa, for you to have me here. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, that's today for the show. Thanks for joining us, and stay tuned to the next episode of We Are Only Human.